I was pulling the night shift at a wall-bounce store, which used to be open 24 hours a day. It was a massive store, and typically, I'd see fewer than 10 customers during my shift. The routine was monotonous, but the company expected me to stay busy with restocking shelves and assisting customers. On this particular night, I was alone in the store. My colleagues were either off or assigned to other locations. I was in the cereal aisle, diligently arranging boxes when I heard a sudden crash from the adjacent aisle. Given how loud the store's sliding doors were, any noise without them opening was unusual. The sound came from the other side of the shelf, and my curiosity was piqued. I glanced around and noticed a man standing at the edge of the aisle. He was staring at me blankly, his eyes devoid of any emotion or recognition. "Do you need something, sir?" I asked, trying to sound polite despite my growing unease. The man responded in a strangely monotone voice, asking for directions to the eggs. His appearance was unsettling. His face was oddly shaped, with his upper lip protruding in a way that reminded me of a cartoon character. It wasn't that he was unattractive, but rather that he had an unnatural quality that made me feel uncomfortable. I finished restocking the cereal aisle as quickly as I could, hoping to avoid further interaction. I then started pushing the stock cart towards the back room. Midway through, the same man suddenly appeared in front of me, blocking my path. He was in his mid-30s, and given my age of 22, I felt a growing sense of vulnerability. He began making small talk, asking me my name, age, where I went to school, and why I was working the night shift. His questions took a disturbing turn as he inquired about my social life, whether I went to parties, had a girlfriend, and then, more awkwardly, if I'd ever had a boyfriend. He placed a hand on my shoulder while asking the latter question, making my skin crawl. I told him I wasn't interested and tried to walk away, but he followed me. I quickened my pace, pushing the cart faster and faster until I reached the back room. I shut the door behind me and took a moment to calm down, realizing that staying back there for too long was against store policy. I decided it was best to wait by the register for him to check out and leave. 20 minutes passed, and he never showed up. I was relieved but frustrated, as I had no way of knowing if he had stolen anything. I needed to use the bathroom, so I made a quick trip to the employee restroom. As soon as I sat down, my heart dropped when I heard the bathroom door open. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. I cautiously lifted my leg to avoid being seen through the crack in the stall door. When I looked up, I saw an eye peering through the crack. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the box cutter from my pocket and slid it through the gap, hoping to force him to move away. Taking advantage of the moment, I flung open the stall door and ran out of the bathroom as fast as I could, fleeing the store. I called my boss multiple times before he answered, and I explained the situation. He advised me to contact the police. By the time the officers arrived, the man was long gone. I only worked the night shift twice more after that, and thankfully, I never saw him again. I worked the night shift at a gas station along a deserted highway from midnight to 6 a.m. The job was usually dull, with only a handful of customers coming in throughout the night. It was a thankless shift, but the extra $5 per hour made it bearable. On one particularly cold December night, I was reading the newspaper and passing time on my phone when I saw the headlights of a red pickup truck pulling into the parking lot. A man emerged and walked over to the gas pump. Initially, I thought he was just refueling, but he stood there for an unusually long time, staring at the pump. As I watched, a chill ran down my spine when I realized he was facing directly towards the store. I could barely make out his features, but his eyes were locked onto mine. I tried to ignore him and return to my newspaper, but my heart wasn't in it. The man's unblinking stare was unnerving. When I looked up again, The man was much closer to the front door of the store. He wasn't moving, just standing there, still staring. My anxiety heightened, and I decided to take action. I locked the door and turned the open sign to closed, trying to avoid any further confrontation. I hid behind the counter, feeling a rising panic. The man started banging on the door, not knocking but slamming with a force that made the whole building shake. The banging continued for what felt like hours, but then it suddenly stopped. I cautiously looked outside and saw that the man had driven off. The police arrived shortly after, and I reported the incident in the red pickup truck. Unfortunately, there was little they could do as the man hadn't committed any criminal acts beyond the frightening behavior. I left that job a few months later, moving on to a position in the city, and the incident gradually faded from my memory. 2 years ago, I worked the night shift at a 7-Eleven from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. in a quiet, rural area. The shift was usually busy with a moderate number of customers, but one particular night turned out to be anything but ordinary. A man in his mid-20s entered the store and began making loud, incoherent noises. At first, I thought he might have a mental disability and felt a surge of sympathy for him. He approached the counter without any items, his head tilted up towards the ceiling while his eyes remained fixed in an unsettling way. I felt a growing sense of discomfort, but tried to handle the situation calmly. Despite my attempts to interact with him, he only responded with more loud noises. I checked outside, expecting to see if he was with someone, but the parking lot was empty. I offered him a bag of chips, hoping to encourage him to leave, and tried to find a number for someone who could help him. After what felt like an eternity, the man finally turned and walked out of the store. Relieved but unsettled, I hoped that was the end of it. An hour later, the store phone rang, and to my horror, it was him again, making the same disturbing noises. I was terrified and paranoid, constantly checking outside through the windows. When my shift ended, I left the store and went home. As soon as I walked in, my phone rang again, and it was the same man, making the same unsettling noises. I was overwhelmed with dread and struggled to hang up. I couldn't sleep that night, feeling as though I was being watched. Strange noises seemed to come from every corner of my house. Weeks later, while cleaning the basement, I discovered scattered papers and disturbing messages on the walls, including my home address and the address of the 7-Eleven. In the basement closet, I found various kitchen knives and a large pocket knife. The realization that the man had been stalking me and hiding in my basement was chilling. Fortunately, he seemed to have left, but the experience left me deeply shaken. During my early days as a police officer, I encountered a harrowing situation while patrolling a remote road surrounded by crops. I was accompanied by my German shepherd, Sammy, who was still new to the job. One night, I noticed a suspicious white van parked amid the crops with both doors open. I decided to investigate, taking Sammy with me. As we approached the van, Sammy began to act erratically, pulling on her leash and barking furiously. When I opened the van's trunk, a foul stench assaulted my senses. Inside, I found 7 body bags, each with a pair of feet sticking out. I immediately called for backup, but the situation quickly escalated when I heard a twig snap nearby. Sammy bolted into the crops, and I lost her. I followed her barking into the dense vegetation, feeling a rising sense of dread as I pushed through the crops, fearing that something or someone might grab me. The sounds of Sammy's barking suddenly stopped, and I was left in eerie silence, surrounded by the unsettling sounds of movement from all directions. My fear intensified as I realized that I was not alone. Out of nowhere, 2 arms wrapped around my throat, choking me. I struggled to breathe and fight back, feeling helpless. Just then, I heard Sammy's bark again, followed by the scream of the man who was choking me. Sammy had returned and bitten the man's leg, giving me a chance to react. I pulled out my gun and, in a desperate move, fired at the attacker. I grabbed Sammy and ran back to the car, feeling as though we were being pursued. Once safely in the car, I drove a quarter-mile down the road without stopping to see if anyone followed. My primary concern was our safety, not the job. Backup arrived shortly after, but the van and its contents had vanished. I felt a profound sense of failure for letting a van full of killers escape. The incident haunted me for months, and I struggled with feelings of cowardice and inadequacy.